Hi, could you please say your name and why you're here?
Yes, hello, my name is Yvonne Gougelet, and we are standing in front of the executive offices of the New York City Board of Elections. I am here because there has been mounting evidence, it's pouring in, of election fraud, election disenfranchisement, voter disenfranchisement, and voter suppression. And the evidence just keeps rolling in. Every single day we hear more information, and I can talk about those instances specifically, but the reason why I personally am here is because I have been helping voters get registered for the past 10 years. It's how I start my political career, my activism career, my community organizing career, by registering thousands and thousands of voters for the past 10 years in California and in New York City, because I'm originally from Florida where there was a lot of voting fraud. So I have worked really hard for a long time to empower voters and educate voters about their right to vote, and to find out that all of this stuff has been happening in New York City and on such a grand scale. It's unbelievable what has happened. I feel very passionate about this because what is going on is people's constitutional rights have been stripped from their hands. I can talk specifically about the details if you would like.
Yes. Could you please lay out some specific details?
So 2 weeks ago today was the New York City primary presidential election, the primary campaign election. And, you know, people were out voting. We heard stories coming in. We heard stories coming in about broken poll machines and poll workers that didn't know information, and there was a lot of stuff that was coming in. So I'm going to just talk about 5 specific things that people need to know. Number 1, prior to the elections, the New York City Board of Elections mailed 66,000 postcards to newly registered voters, the type of voters that I would have been working with, right? Brand new voters that have never voted before got a postcard in the mail stating that the primary elections were happening in September. What? The primaries are in April, and the New York City Board of Elections mailed a postcard stating that the primaries were happening in September. What we call that is voter disenfranchisement, voter suppression. They have misled 66,000 newly registered voters. That is unacceptable, unbelievable that this would even happen. Mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, leading up to the primary elections, hundreds of thousands of New York State voters had their registration deleted. This is not conspiracy, this is not a theory. We have it, we know it, because the Brooklyn Board of Elections has given us that information. Several 100,000 voters had their registration deleted without absolutely any justification whatsoever or explanation. Number 2, this is actually number 3. Thousands of people, thousands of voters in New York City, let's be specific, had their party switched from Democrat or Republican to either independent or unaffiliated. Now, why does that matter? New York City, New York State, is a closed primary. Now, what some people out there might not know what a closed primary is that if you're not a Democrat, if you're not a Republican, you're not allowed to vote for those particular primary elections. Okay, that's an issue that we can talk about at another time. Let's talk about the fact that thousands and thousands of people have reported that their party was switched. Number 4, we have reports of thousands and thousands of people showing up to vote. It says online, registered Democrat. They have their voter card. It says registered Democrat. And the poll workers are just, well, you're not in the book, you're not in the book, you're not in the book. So these people are like, well, what, you know, like, they're pissed, they're angry. Of course they're angry. They've been registered for 20 years, they've been voting for 20 years. Oh, like little sweet old people have been like protesting upstairs, like, my vote has been taken away from me. So it's said online, it's said on their voting registration card, but yet they weren't in the records. So that's a whole other issue. So what we have here, hundreds of thousands of people who were deleted, thousands of people who had their party switched, thousands of people who were registered in the right party but were told they weren't and turned away. Huge, 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 massive. It's on a grand scale. I've never seen anything like it in my entire life. It is worse than the hanging Chad. And I didn't think that anything could possibly be any worse than what the elections that were happening in 2000 and 2004 in Florida. So finally, and one of the most important key things to keep in mind is that finally people were showing up and they were told that they weren't in the books. They were given an affidavit or provisional ballot. And for those of you that don't know what that means, these ballots are not actual ballots. They're just replacement ballots that were not counted. And that's what's important to keep in mind. According to Michael Ryan, the executive director of the Board of Elections, has stated himself, there are over 100,000 affidavits and provisional ballots that were signed and voted on. That's over 100,000 people who voted, whose votes were not counted. We're talking maybe 500,000 people weren't able to vote or voted on fake ballots that weren't counted. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. And where we're at now is when we've heard about all these things, we've heard from voters, we've heard from poll workers, we've heard from voting rights activists and voting rights organizations. We're angry. This is a national crisis. It's not just, and listen, it's not about Bernie Sanders or Hillary or Trump. Have I mentioned any of the candidates at this point? I haven't. Why? Because this is a constitutional issue. This is a huge issue, and everyone out there who cares about voting at all should care about this. If you support Hillary, if you support Trump, if you support Bernie, you should be concerned that somebody somehow just deleted and switched people's information. So what's so important about what's going on right now is that this has been happening in Arizona, Florida, Chicago, Wyoming, Rhode Island. There's all of these incidences of poll places closing late. It's called voter disenfranchisement. It's called voter suppression. It's a tactic. We have politicians on record that have talked about how great voter suppression is and how great voter disenfranchisement is because they know that the state ID laws, it stops people from voting. So we have all the evidence, and I helped organize a protest today, and it's not necessarily a protest. We are engaging in our own rights that we can show up to the Board of Elections and let them know how we feel, all the evidence that we have. On May 5th, Thursday at 3:30 p.m., the Brooklyn Board of Elections is going to hand over some numbers. Hillary Clinton had this many votes. Bernie had this many votes. Trump had this many votes. When they turn over those certified votes, nothing that we discover in terms of election fraud is going to matter when those votes are certified. And so what we are trying to do as active, engaged, enraged citizens is that we're trying to stop the certification. And apparently in order to do that, we need a court order. So we have some lawyers that have filed a lawsuit. We don't know where we're at, I mean, they're on my phone, I gotta figure it out. I don't know where we are with that right now. But I'm not gonna wait for them either. All of us that were here today, we had veterans speak today. Veterans who said, I fought for people's rights, and guess what? I wasn't able to vote. Or my friends and family weren't able to vote. Or I was a poll worker and I saw what was going down. Or some of them have been witnessing the audits. Veterans who are volunteering to help democracy again. And veterans are saying, I am going and I am watching the audits. Now the audits is essentially counting of the affidavits and the ballots and the absentee ballots. And there's a lot of evidence that it's not being done legally. It's being done behind closed doors. There aren't witnesses. It's just one thing after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. So the evidence is pouring in, and and we need to stop the certification. We're going to do an emergency rally again on Wednesday, tomorrow night, depending on when you watch this video, Wednesday, May 4th at 5:30 p.m. in front of the Brooklyn Board of Elections. We're going to do emergency rally then and there because it's the night before the certification. It's a town hall, it's an open rally, we're going to have people speak. It's a last minute rally because our work is not done today and we need more people to get involved. And of course, they hold these commissioners meetings in the afternoon when nobody is able to, nobody's able to get off work and come and be here. They hold these things when nobody can get off work. So we actually had tripled the numbers this week. So last week there was 20 speakers. This week we had, maybe like, I don't know, we had like a packed room. It was awesome. I know that was a lot of information, but do you have any more questions?
Well, yeah, so what do you think about the hearing that happened upstairs today?
Well, first of all, they started the hearing with 2 long, really boring and unorganized hearings about other issues that had nothing to do with the New York primaries. Something that has to do with something going on in June. The certifications for these primary elections are on Thursday, and they're talking about 2 cases that have something to do with some other election down in June. So why did they do that? They stalled the process. They waited until half the media left. They waited until a lot of the speakers had to leave. They do it on purpose. The meeting started at 1:30. We didn't get to start talking until 4 o'clock. We've been here since 12. They do this on purpose. They do it on purpose. And that's cool because we know their tricks and we're patient and we waited. So that was issue number 1. Issue number 2 is they clearly don't understand